The shovel felt heavy in my hands, far heavier than it should have. My palms were damp with sweat, even though the night air was cool and still. The moon hung high above me, round and bright, spilling pale light across the yard like a spotlight. Every shadow looked like it was alive. The ground was harder than I expected. I pushed the shovel down, my muscles aching as the blade scraped against stubborn soil and rocks. My heart was racing so fast that I thought my chest would burst. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to know about any of this, but I had seen too much already. The dirt gave way at last, and I heard a hollow thud. My stomach twisted. I dropped to my knees and brushed the soil aside with my hands, my nails caked with mud. That's when I saw it. A glass bottle, tightly sealed with dark red wax. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. I picked it up carefully, my hands trembling so badly that the glass almost slipped. The moonlight glinted off the surface, and for a second I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stop right there, to bury it again, and pretend I had never touched it. But curiosity was stronger. I held the bottle close to my face and squinted. Inside, floating in some kind of cloudy liquid, were strands of hair. Not just any hair. Long, brown, tangled strands that looked exactly like mine. My blood turned cold. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I set the bottle down and dug faster, desperate, almost frantic. Another bottle appeared, smaller this time, but sealed just the same. When I lifted it, I saw what looked like tiny teeth pressed against the glass. Human teeth. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I wanted to throw it away, to smash it against the ground, but I couldn't. Something inside me whispered that destroying it would be worse than finding it. I pressed on, the soil giving way easier now. The third bottle appeared, larger than the others, the wax cracked slightly at the top. My breath came in sharp gasps as I pulled it free and wiped the dirt away. Inside, folded tightly, was a piece of paper. Even through the glass, I could see strange markings, symbols I didn't recognize, circles and lines drawn with a heavy hand. That was when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy against the grass. I froze. The bottle slipped slightly in my grip, and I held it tight against my chest as if that could hide it. My ears rang. My body refused to move. The sound grew closer, steady, unhurried. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. My skin already knew. My heart already knew. "Why are you out here?" The voice was low. Calm. Too calm. I turned slowly, the bottle still clutched in my hands. And there he was, my husband, standing just a few feet away, the moonlight carving deep shadows across his face. His eyes weren't wide with surprise or anger. They were steady, unblinking, as though he had expected this all along. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night stretched endlessly between us, broken only by the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. The bottle felt like it was burning in my hands, daring me to let him see what I had found. He stepped closer, and in that instant I realized I wasn't the one who had caught him. He had caught me. It began almost a year ago, though at the time I didn't know how serious it was. I had woken up in the middle of the night, restless and thirsty. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. I padded into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and that's when I noticed the back door wasn't shut properly. A sliver of moonlight spilled in through the gap, pale and eerie. At first I thought maybe I'd forgotten to lock it before bed, but then I heard the faint scrape of metal against earth. Curious, I stepped closer, pulling the curtain just slightly aside. My breath fogged the glass as I pressed against the window. There he was, Daniel, my husband. He was out in the yard, hunched over, a shovel in his hands. The moon was high above him, the light gleaming on his shoulders as he dug steadily into the ground. His movements were strange, slow, careful, almost ritualistic. He wasn't planting anything. He wasn't fixing anything. And when the hole was deep enough, I saw him lower something inside. The glass caught the light for just a second. A bottle. He crouched there for a long while, murmuring words I couldn't hear. Then he covered it carefully, patting the soil flat like a man hiding something precious. When he finally returned inside, his face was calm, as if he had simply gone out for fresh air. I didn't say anything that night. I told myself it wasn't my business. Maybe it was just trash he didn't want me to see. Maybe I was half dreaming. But then it happened again. The next full moon, I woke once more, drawn by some invisible pull. I crept to the window, and there he was, shoveling, burying another bottle in a different corner of the yard. His posture, the care with which he handled the object, it made the hair on my arms stand on end. In the morning, over breakfast, I tried to bring it up casually. "You were outside last night," I said, stirring my coffee. He didn't look up from his plate. "You were dreaming." "No, I saw you—" He cut me off, his voice firm. "You were dreaming." The way he said it made me go silent. His eyes were steady, unblinking, as though daring me to argue. I swallowed the rest of my questions with my toast, but I couldn't shake it off. A week later, I caught our son, Eli, pressed against the same window, his little hands flat against the glass. "Eli, what are you doing up?" I whispered. He turned to me, his face pale in the moonlight. "Daddy's talking to the ground," he said simply, before running back to bed. The word sent a chill through me. Talking to the ground? What could that mean? For days, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe Daniel was burying things for gardening, though I never saw new plants. Maybe he was disposing of old glass bottles safely, though why wait for the full moon? The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. There was something deliberate about it all. Something that didn't fit into ordinary life. And then, just as I was beginning to wonder if I should let it go, I noticed something else. Something that made my stomach tighten with fear. Every time he buried a bottle, he came back inside different. His eyes seemed darker, his voice heavier. And sometimes when I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I could feel him watching me longer than usual, his breath slow and measured, as though he was waiting for something. The first time I dug into the backyard, it wasn't because I was brave. It was because I couldn't take the silence anymore. Weeks had passed since Eli whispered about his father talking to the ground, but the words stayed with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Every time I saw Daniel walk across the yard, my skin prickled. I'd glance out the kitchen window, pretending to wash dishes, and watch him pace slowly along the fence, as if measuring where to dig next. One afternoon, after he left for work and Eli was at school, I stood at the back door staring at the lawn. The shovel leaned against the wall, the same one he always used. I told myself I'd only look. Just one glance. If I didn't find anything, maybe I could finally stop imagining things. The earth was softer than I expected. The patch of grass near the shed almost welcomed the blade of the shovel, turning over with only a few heavy thrusts. My pulse quickened as I went deeper, dirt clinging to my shoes, the smell of soil thick in the air. Then, there it was. The glass shimmered faintly under the dirt, the wax seal a deep red against the dark earth. I hesitated. My hands shook as I brushed it clean and pulled it free. It was heavier than it looked. The liquid inside swirled slowly, thick and cloudy. Floating in it was a small bundle tied with thread. At first I thought it was just string or maybe grass, but then my stomach lurched. It was hair. Brown hair. My hair. I knew it instantly. It wasn't just the color, but the way it curled slightly at the ends, just like mine. My throat tightened as I realized what I was holding, and tied within the strands was something small and metallic. I shook the bottle gently until it pressed against the glass. My wedding ring, the one I had lost years ago. I remember the day I thought it slipped down the drain while washing dishes. I had cried, searched everywhere, but it was gone. Daniel had comforted me then, saying it was just a ring, that we'd buy another someday. But here it was, sealed in a bottle, buried in the dirt. My hands trembled. I almost dropped it. Why would he do this? Why would he take something so personal and bury it in the ground? A shadow crossed the yard, and I froze, clutching the bottle to my chest. But it was only Mrs. Turner, our elderly neighbor, slowly making her way past the fence with her little dog. She stopped when she saw me with the dirt at my feet. Her eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be digging there," she said softly. I swallowed, my voice thin. "Why not?" She leaned on her cane, her face unreadable. "Because your husband doesn't want you to." The words sent a shiver straight through me. She said it so matter-of-factly, as though she knew exactly what I had found. Before I could respond, she gave me a long look, then turned and shuffled away, her dog trotting beside her. I stood frozen in the yard, the bottle heavy in my hands. My breath came in shallow bursts, my heart pounding. It wasn't just the discovery of my hair and ring, it was the certainty in Mrs. Turner's voice. When Daniel came home that evening, I tried to act normal, but I could barely look at him. His face was calm, his smile steady, but something in his eyes. Something told me he knew. Knew that I had touched what wasn't mine. Knew that I had crossed into something I was never meant to see. It started with Eli's nightmares. At first, I thought it was just a child's imagination. He would wake in the middle of the night crying softly, saying he heard the ground talking. I would sit on his bed, stroke his hair, and whisper that it was only the wind. But the way he looked at me, wide-eyed, trembling, made me doubt my own words. One night, I decided to listen. I stayed in his room after he fell back asleep, my ears straining. At first, there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the tick of the old clock in the hallway. Then faintly, through the thin glass of his window, I heard it. A low murmur. It was coming from the yard. My chest tightened as I crept to the window and pushed the curtain aside. There he was again, Daniel, kneeling over a fresh mound of dirt, his hands pressed firmly against the soil. His lips moved quickly, whispering words I couldn't understand. His face looked different in the moonlight, sharper, his eyes fixed on the ground as though it might answer him. I shut the curtain at once, my hands shaking. I didn't want Eli to wake and see what I had seen. The next morning, I went outside pretending to water the plants. The earth where Daniel had knelt was disturbed, darker than the rest of the yard. I could almost hear Eli's voice echoing. "The ground is talking." That afternoon, Mrs. Turner called me over. She stood by her gate, her little dog resting at her feet. Her eyes, clouded with age but sharp with memory, studied me. "You found one, didn't you?" she asked. My mouth went dry. I didn't answer. She sighed, as though she'd been waiting for this moment. "You're not the first." The words rooted me in place. My husband, before he passed, he did the same thing. Bottles, buried under the moon. He said it was to keep people close, to bind them. I didn't understand it at first, and when I finally did, it was too late. Her voice trembled. "If you're wise, you'll be careful." Her warning followed me back into the house, clinging to me like smoke. That night, Daniel came home later than usual. His clothes smelled faintly of soil. At dinner, he was quiet, his eyes flicking to me more often than normal. Each time they lingered too long, my stomach twisted. Finally, I gathered the courage to ask, "Why do you bury bottles in the yard?" The fork slipped from his hand. For a moment, his face drained of color. Then, slowly, he smiled, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "What bottles?" My voice cracked. "Don't play games, Daniel. I've seen them." His smile disappeared. He leaned across the table, his voice low and sharp. "You don't go near the backyard again. Ever." The words struck like a whip. I lowered my gaze, my hands trembling in my lap. He picked up his fork and continued eating as if nothing had happened, but the air between us had shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening. Sometime past midnight, I heard it again. The scrape of a shovel, the soft thud of earth. But this time, there was something else. Another set of footsteps. I crept to the window, barely daring to breathe. In the moonlight, I saw Daniel bent low over the ground, whispering. And beside him, though I couldn't see clearly, stood a dark figure, still and silent, watching him. My blood ran cold. I shut the curtain quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. Who or what was out there with him? And why did it feel like whatever was buried in those bottles wasn't meant to stay hidden forever? The night of the next full moon, I didn't wait for Daniel to leave the bed. I was already awake, sitting by the window, staring at the silver light draped across the lawn. My heart was pounding, but this time, I wasn't going to sit back and pretend. When his breathing grew deep and steady beside me, I slipped out of bed, grabbed the shovel, and went out into the yard. The grass was damp with dew, the earth cool beneath my shoes. I chose a spot near the shed, one I had seen him return to again and again. The shovel sliced into the dirt with a dull thud. My arms ached, but I didn't stop. The soil gave way faster than I expected, as though it knew I was coming. Soon, my fingers brushed against glass. The first bottle was small. Inside were dried flower petals and a button from Eli's old jacket. My breath caught. I dug faster. The second bottle was heavier. I wiped the dirt away and nearly dropped it. Inside, pressed against the glass, was a photograph. Our wedding picture, the edges blackened as if burned. My reflection trembled in the moonlit glass, my own smile mocking me. I wanted to stop, but something inside pushed me deeper. I dug again, frantic, my hands raw, until another bottle appeared. This one was larger, sealed tighter, the wax cracked from the strain of the soil. My chest tightened as I pulled it free. The liquid inside was darker, murkier than the rest. And floating in it, wrapped in black thread, was a folded photograph. I held it up to the moonlight, my breath shallow. When the paper shifted, I saw the face clearly. It was Eli, my son. His school picture, the one I had framed in the living room, now bound and buried like some kind of offering. The bottle slipped from my fingers and landed in the dirt with a dull thud. Panic surged through me, cold and suffocating. Why him? Why my son? A sound behind me made me spin around. Daniel stood just a few feet away, the shovel in his hand. His face was unreadable, his eyes fixed on the bottle at my feet. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, he stepped closer, his voice low. "You weren't supposed to see that." My throat was dry. "What are you doing? Why Eli?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched, picking up the bottle gently, brushing the dirt away with the care of a man handling glass treasure. His eyes gleamed in the moonlight, but they were darker than I had ever seen them. "It keeps us safe," he said finally, his voice calm, almost tender. "The bottles, they bind what matters. They protect what I can't." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "That's not protection. That's—" I couldn't finish. My voice cracked under the weight of fear. Daniel stood slowly, the shovel still in one hand, the bottle in the other. He looked at me as though I were the stranger in the yard, not him. "You shouldn't have dug them up," he said. "Once they're opened, they can't be hidden again." The night air seemed to thicken around us. The bottles at my feet glistened under the moon, silent but heavy, as if holding secrets too dark to name. I reached for Eli's photograph inside the glass, but Daniel's grip tightened. For the first time in our marriage, I realized I didn't know the man standing in front of me at all. And as the moonlight poured over us, illuminating the dirt, the bottles, and the silent house behind, I knew one thing with chilling certainty. Nothing in our lives would ever be the same again.